Lesson 869, Tasty Fruit, Two-Way Tables and Bar Graphs. In this lesson, you'll identify and represent the same data in bar graphs and in two-way frequency tables. Well, in this lesson, we are going to step away from scatter plots. We're on page 94 in your notebook. This unit is on different data displays, and we've been spending a lot of time on scatter plots, and I love them. But there's other data displays that we should explore, and we will here today. Our learning target is to identify and represent the same data. Identify and represent the same data in bar graphs and in two-way tables. So these are just two more ways to display the data that people collect. When we collect data by measuring attributes like height, we call that numerical data. But when we collect data by counting things in various categories, like tall and short, we call that categorical. Categories, categorical data. So to help organize categorical data, these are two ways that we can display that information, two-way tables and bar graphs. So let's explore these a little bit. So these are results of a study on meditation and athletes' state of mind before a track meet. So sometimes athletes get a little worked up before a track meet, but if they meditate, let's see if they get more anxious or calm or if it matters at all. So we're looking at this two-way table, and I'm going to start by just covering up a couple of the parts of this two-way table. You can see on the left side we have labels for whether the athletes are calm or anxious. And along the top you can see the two labels that say that these are students that meditated or didn't meditate. So this is a table, but it goes both ways this time, a two-way table. You can see that of all the athletes that they interviewed, we have 45 students that have these two qualities. 45 students, they were calm and they also meditated. And we have some other numbers that we can look at as well. We have 23 that were anxious, even though they meditated. So that's what we have in these four cells here where the headings intersect. But then we also have those, the row and the column that I covered up that are the totals. So we're going to take a moment just to make sense of the data here and talk about how these come together in totals. Let's start by coming down here. So we have students who meditated before the race. And of those students that meditated, 45 wound up being pretty calm, and 23 were still kind of anxious. And those were all of the athletes we had that just falls into those two categories. They were calm or they were anxious. They didn't have any middle ground to choose. And I can add those two together for my total. So the total number of athletes that meditated were these two combined. So if I add those together going this way, I get 68. So 68 of those athletes spent some time meditating. Well, here I'm given the total. I know that I had 29 athletes, a total of 29 athletes that didn't meditate. But I only have one of these numbers here. I know that I added these two together, the calm ones and the anxious ones, to get my total. So it makes sense that I should be able to take the total and subtract the anxious athletes, and that would give me the calm ones. If I took 29 and subtracted 21, I would have 8. So that makes sense. The calm ones and the anxious ones put together give me my total. I could also look at my two-way table going horizontally. So this should work. Of all my calm athletes, 45 meditated, and it looks like 8 did not meditate. That should add together to give me a total going this way. 45 plus 8 should be equal to 53. For the anxious students, 23 plus 21 should be 44. A total of 44 who ended up anxious. Some meditated, some didn't. And this is our grand total. These are all the athletes we had. If I add up all 4 of these cells, I end up with 99 total athletes that were interviewed. Again, 68 meditated and 29 didn't. And in the other direction, 53 were calm and 44 were still anxious. Those are our totals. All right. So I can express this same categorical data. And again, our categories are they're calm or they're anxious, they meditate or they don't meditate, in a bar graph. There's a lot of different kinds of bar graphs, and this one's a double bar graph. We can see these headings expressed down here. And we can see these other headings, calm and anxious, expressed as empty bars or shaded bars. So, you know what, we already did this direction here, fill in the missing values in the table. We already talked through that. Here we're asked to add a bar to represent the number of people who did not meditate and were calm. Okay, did not meditate and were calm. Now this information comes from our table. We'll come back to this in just a moment, but let me just show you. Here's the ones that meditated. And you can see that 45 of them were calm, that's the empty bar, and 23 of them were anxious, that's the shaded bar. These were both people who meditated. So we're going to do the same thing for did not meditate. Now we already have the bar for anxious students, the shaded one filled in. But we're going to make another bar for the calm students. It's going to be an open bar. So it looks like it was just 8 people who were calm. So I'm going to make a bar that's just a little below 10. There we go. And I'm going to leave it open. So just looking at this, this bar graph is a nice visual to see that it looks like it really made a difference for students to meditate. The students that meditated, I can see they were calmer. The ones that didn't meditate, they were more anxious. Let's analyze this data a little bit more. We're asked to add a star where 21 appears in the bar graph. Well, I can see where 21 appears on the table. They were the anxious athletes that did not meditate. Let's find that on the bar graph. The anxious ones, that's a shaded bar, that did not meditate. So it must be this bar right here. That 21 in this scenario means there were 21 athletes who did not meditate and were anxious. Those are our categories. Did not meditate and were anxious. And finally, we're asked to circle 44 in the two-way table and answer what that means. So there it is. Let me look at these headings to get a sense of what that number means. I know 44 is a total, and going horizontally, I can see it's the total of the anxious athletes. In total, there were 44 anxious athletes. So those two headings that come together in that 44 tell me what that 44 means. So some of those students meditated, some didn't meditate, but all of them were anxious. So there's benefits to both kinds of displays. Let's see if I can show everything at once. The benefit to a two-way table is it's easy to see precise numbers. If I want to know the total number of anxious students, I can look right there and I see that it's 44. On the graph, I would have to estimate that number a little bit. But a bar graph, it's easy to compare categories by the bar height. And that's what we looked at earlier. Looking at these, it's easy to see that the students that meditated tended to be a lot more calm. That bar is much higher for the students that meditated than for the students that didn't meditate. Really has a calming effect, that meditation. So today we got to look at two new kinds of data displays, two-way tables and bar graphs.